And I rewrote a couple of songs I can remember last night when it started to thunder and lightning. On the day I was found, all the rain fell down. There was tea brewing in my hometown. And lightning never strikes the same bloke twice. That's not quite true, but apparently Dad's granddad was struck by lightning and killed. He had a small holding, that's a rented small farm. He had 7 daughters and a son. The son died aged 31 in 1931 from heart valve trouble. And in those days, even if he could have afforded to pay the doctor, they couldn't have done anything. And he's buried in a nameless grave because he was so poor. It's a pauper's grave. There's like a marble frame to the grave, but there's no writing on it. Dad's not sure which one's which because they're two side by side. And Dad was told which was his. Dad could just about remember him because Dad was 4 when he died. And I've forgotten what I was talking about. I do that now. It's just old age. I'm nearly 60. Well, in less than 3 years I will be. Yeah. And Dad only looked 70 when he was 90. But and of course, yeah. I mean, in those days they had big families because of a lot of the children died from diseases which can be treated now. But Dad used to say things like, there used to be a fever hospital at the top of that certain bank, and it's not there now. And he had scarlet fever. That's the one I can remember. No, he's not one of his cousins. He's one of his cousins' husbands had polio, but they couldn't cure that then. What else was there? Can't remember, but yeah, I mean, other than that, I've forgotten what I'm talking about. Yeah, I have. The jokes, well, I don't think there were any more, but most of them were rewritten songs that I've used to listen to in the past, and some of it's been explained to me why it's been said and stuff and that, but those are the two I can remember. And normally you'd expect someone like me to panic in a thunderstorm, but I used to be out in them when I was a milkman, and it was so heavy last night that I was soaked in no time. It wasn't raining or thundering when I set off, but I went quite a long way at the supermarket. I was reluctant to leave the house because I don't know whether people break in. They seem to have done in the past, but the doors have been changed. It's a rented house, so it's not my responsibility, but I've taken the locks and handles off the doors to stop people getting in. And at one point I had flush plates over where the handles fitted, so that you'd have to drill into the plates to get the screws out to take the plate off, so you could put a spindle into the lock mechanism and turn it. But yeah, they put new doors on because of it wasn't really a cry out from me. I think it was actually from the neighbour. But my doors got changed. I don't think he's have yet, but he has sash locks on now. But they put them on this when they came out, and they put undersized screws. They were held by 2 screws, and 3 of them. There was 4 of them. 3 of the screws were undersized, so if you'd leant against the door, it would have opened. You know, they wouldn't have held it, but it took quite a time to get them changed. But I mean, I'm not moaning. I can't complain because it's not my responsibility, but they've changed them. I mean, I do fix things that I can do because certain jobs I've been taught at college, like we did. I didn't start at college after school. I did general mechanical engineering. I studied mechanical engineering, building construction. I could build an engine completely just about before I left that course. We studied stick welding. There was no MIG welding then. We still studied oxyacetylene welding, and there was only one of the lads could do aluminium welding. But I've since soldered a car radiator with oxyacetylene, but it didn't last because it was such a big hole in it. I just covered it with pieces of solder wire, and carefully attached them to each other with the flame, but they blew out in the end. And one of the lads, it was when I worked on rally cars, one of the lads looked at the top mount on the radiator. He said, "It's too long, is that?" And he put a fold in it to shorten it, and it was okay after that. He said, "That's where it's gone. It's been rubbing on the inner wing." But it was supposedly a Cooper S or 1275 GT radiator mounting, and he didn't know, but he wasn't an expert on minis, and it was it was a GT, 1275 GT top mount, and they were in a Clubman body, and the inner wings were further apart. It was a different front end, which I later found out and got the right. No, I didn't have to because it folded the mount. But yeah, that's why it did it. It was the wrong radiator mount, and that came from a very famous mini parts specialist. They've got it wrong. Okay, they supplied the body, but I put that mount on after, and I bought it from there, and it was a competition Cooper S radiator that blew, and they weren't cheap. So it wasn't good, that. But have I got rabbiting on about anything else about that Mini? I don't think I can remember anything really that was bad on it, but that was anybody's fault really. And there were rumours about somebody going to college in a Mini, parts falling off and then putting them behind the hedge and picking them up on the way back. No, one bolt came off. I built the whole car, and the only thing I didn't do was the paint job. That was specialist and needed specialist equipment. I hadn't done the training. I hadn't had the training for that, but the equipment's a lot cheaper now. But yeah, there was one of the alternator mounting bolts came off because I hadn't put a spring washer on it, and that's the only thing that came off. But unfortunately, I heard something bouncing up and down under the car, and I looked in the rear view mirror and I saw this silver object spinning like that, and it just missed the roof of the car behind me. I don't think there was one behind that. It was about that far above the roof of the car. It wasn't funny really, but the block in the car behind, I noticed him duck as it went over the roof line. Not funny, but it didn't hit him and didn't hit anyone else. But I got home that day because I was about 15 miles from home. The fan belt came loose, but the car didn't overheat and the batteries didn't run out of charge, because once the fan belt stops turning the alternator, the battery starts to go flat, and there's no water pump working. And the only other time I had a radiator, bottom radiator hose blow off, because then I hadn't got it on right, and it was on a day that it wasn't fog, it was freezing fog, and it kept the engine cool because it was about 15 miles to college. And we went into town at dinner time we heard a pop, and I saw steam in the rearview mirror, but I thought I'd hit something. And my mate had a look on the point and said, "What hot is that?" You could see a heat haze coming off the engine and the bonnet. And we filled it with water because we found out what had happened. And we managed to get it into the engine. I think we were in a multi-storey car park, and there were toilets, and we filled it with water. It might have been hot water we put in, from the tap. Yeah, we did get water in it and fill it, and it was okay, but 15 miles without any water in it, so I wonder it didn't do it damage. I've never lost the oil out of a Mini, but yeah, and it's had. I was talking about it at work where I worked on rally cars. I said, it's good as that Slick 50. It had Slick 50 in the oil. It was like PTFE. It like coated the engine with PTFE, and that may have saved it a bit, but they're sort of laughing about that. But I know somebody who put an additive into gearbox oil, carbon, I think it was carbon powder, and it blocked the bark rings up, which is why it wouldn't go into gear. He didn't know that, but I told him later, yeah, that'll be what it was, because I've broken bark rings on. I used to often break the bark rings on Minis from changing gear too fast. It's like a cone clutch, and it has teeth on to break the oil film down, and if the teeth wear out, they won't work, because they pierce the oil film. And there were problems with the Bedford CF van I used to drive on the milk round. Similar problem, I think, changing gear too fast. They said it was the way I changed gear or something, I don't know. But yeah, it did. There were other problems with that van, though. It was terrible. It broke down the first day we had it. But yeah, there was kind of hints around that time about somebody bending selector rods through being too rough with the gearbox. But that was an F1 driver, it wasn't me. A very famous one, but he was notoriously rough with the gearbox, and that's why it was always failing, and his teammates wasn't.